Ladies and gentlemen, buckle up, because today we're diving into one of the most electrifying, controversial, and downright legendary moments in the history of comedy. This isn't just another story about a comedian making it big. No, this is the tale of how Steve Harvey, a man with nothing but grit, hunger, and a burning desire to prove himself, walked onto a stage one night and delivered a comedy set so unforgettable that it turned him into a star, almost overnight. And trust me, you're going to want to stay locked in until the end of this story, because the twists, the doubts, the failures, and the ultimate triumph will leave you stunned. But before we dive deeper, don't forget, make sure you follow this channel so you never miss another deep dive into the lives and moments that shaped the icons we all know today. Setting the stage, the man before the fame. Before Steve Harvey became the sharply dressed, smooth-talking host of Family Feud. Before he was the best-selling author telling women how to decode men in Act Like a Lady, Think Like a Man. Before the Suits, the Millions, the talk shows, and even before the infamous Miss Universe slip-up, he was just Broderick Stephen Harvey, a struggling man trying to carve out his place in the world. Born in West Virginia in 1957, raised in Cleveland, Steve Harvey wasn't born with a silver spoon. In fact, his beginnings were far closer to the steel of a factory floor and the dust of poverty than the glitter of Hollywood. He tried everything, working in a factory, boxing, selling insurance, even cleaning carpets. He chased one hustle after another, not because he was restless, but because he was desperate to survive. And here's where the story turns raw. Harvey wasn't a man destined to succeed. In fact, if you looked at his life back then, the odds were completely stacked against him. He battled with homelessness, sleeping in his car for years, showering at gas stations or hotel bathrooms when he could sneak in. His diet? Bologna sandwiches and instant noodles, if he was lucky. But through all of this, there was one dream that refused to die inside of him: comedy. The struggle. Chasing the Mick Steve. Harvey's early attempts at comedy were not glamorous. We love to imagine the bright lights and roaring applause, but in truth, his first gigs were small clubs, dive bars, and anywhere that had a microphone. And most of those early nights, brutal. The crowd didn't know him. They didn't care about him. They weren't rooting for him. If anything, they were daring him to fail. Some nights he did. Some nights his jokes fell flat and the silence was deafening. It was. But hold on. Before I drop the details of that set, make sure you hit Beck, the B, the stage, Harlem's world-famous A, the show Tim. Now, for Steve Harvey the set, the picture this. A, packed appall his Joan Min by the end of the night. The Apollo audience, the same crowd infamous for booing legends off the stage, was on its feet, giving Steve Harvey a standing ovation. Overnight, he wasn't just another struggling comic. He was Steve the. But this D now, let me remind you, if you're enjoying this breakdown of the night Steve Harvey went from nobody to star, you hey B the but and the D. Here's where I want to stir up some controversy. Some say Steve Harvey was destined for stardom, that his talent was undeniable, and the Apollo stage was just the platform he needed. Others argue it was luck, that if he hadn't landed that spot on Showtime, we might. What do you think? Was Steve Harvey's rise a matter of fate, or was it just one lucky night? Drop your thoughts in the comments, but while you're at it, don't forget. Fall, because the lega looking back it was the night he proved, to the world, and maybe more, importantly, to himself, that he wasn't just another man with a dream, he was a star. And isn't that what makes his story so powerful? The idea that one moment, one chance, one stage can change everything. Closing, so when you see Steve Harvey today in his sharp suits, hosting Family Feud or giving motivational talks about success, remember where it all started. Remember the nights he slept in his car, the times he almost gave up, and the moment he stood on the Apollo stage and turned his pain into power. Because that, my friends, is the comedy set that made Steve Harvey a star overnight. And before we wrap this up, Let me say it one last time. If you enjoyed this deep dive, if you want more stories that pull back the curtain on the legends of entertainment, make sure you follow this channel right now. After the Apollo riding the wave of fame. When Steve Harvey walked off the Apollo stage that night, he wasn't the same man who walked on. In fact, that single set triggered a ripple effect across the comedy world. Suddenly his phone started ringing. Bookers who wouldn't return his calls before were now offering him slots. TV scouts, always lurking in the shadows of the Apollo, started whispering his name in network meetings. The overnight star label? It wasn't just hype. For Harvey, that night was the pivot point, the bridge from obscurity to recognition. But let's make something clear. Fame is never as smooth as it looks. While some people cheered him as the next great voice in comedy, others were quick to criticize. They said he wasn't clean enough. They said his humor was too street, too raw, too black for mainstream America. And here's the tension. Harvey had to decide, should he tone himself down to please the mainstream, or should he stay authentic and risk being sidelined? This is where the story gets spicy. And trust me, you'll want to keep following along. And speaking of following, yeah, you guessed it. Make sure you follow this channel right now so you don't miss the next twist in this unbelievable rise. The comedy road, touring America fresh off his Apollo success, Harvey hit the road. Clubs, theaters, festivals, you name it, he was there. And with every set, his reputation grew. But if you think the road was glamorous, think again. Touring for a rising comedian in the 1980s and early 90s meant long drives, cheap motels, and dealing with crowds that could turn hostile in a heartbeat. Harvey would often perform in towns where the audience wasn't exactly eager to hear from a black comedian. He faced hecklers, racism, and nights where the laughs came harder than the silence. But he adapted. Harvey had a secret weapon, his ability to read a crowd. He wasn't just telling jokes. He was studying people, adjusting on the fly and delivering material that hit them where it mattered. That skill, honed on the tough streets of Cleveland and tested at the Apollo, became his superpower. Breaking into television soon, television came calling. Small roles at first, but Steve Harvey had that it factor. You couldn't ignore his presence. His timing, his facial expressions, that booming laugh, it translated perfectly on screen. In 1994, Harvey landed The Steve Harvey Show on the WB network. It wasn't just another sitcom, it became a cultural staple. The chemistry between Harvey and Cedric the Entertainer lit up screens. Kids loved it. Parents loved it. And suddenly, Steve wasn't just a stand-up comic anymore, he was a household name. But here's where the controversy swirled again. Critics said Harvey was playing into stereotypes. Others said he wasn't pushing comedy forward the way peers like Chris Rock or Eddie Murphy were. But Harvey didn't care. He wasn't trying to be them. He was carving his own lane. And again, the debate raged. Was he a true innovator or just a comedian lucky enough to ride a wave of timing? Don't forget, drop your take in the comments. And of course, follow this channel for more breakdowns like this. The Kings of Comedy era fast forward to the late 1990s, and we hit the era that cemented Harvey as a comedy legend, the original Kings of Comedy. Imagine this, 4 titans of comedy, Steve Harvey, Cedric the Entertainer, D.L. Hewley, and Bernie Mac sharing one stage. It wasn't just a tour, it was a cultural movement, black comedy, raw and unapologetic, taking over arenas and proving that mainstream America couldn't ignore it anymore. Steve wasn't the edgiest on the tour. Bernie Mac had that raw fire. D.L. Hewley had sharp political takes. Cedric brought the smooth charisma. But Harvey, he was the glue. He was the host, the anchor, the one who tied it all together. His presence elevated the whole show. And when Spike Lee turned it into a film, the original Kings of Comedy, Harvey's profile shot even higher. Overnight success? Maybe. But now, Harvey was something even bigger. He was a king. The controversy. Too safe or just smart? Here's the debate that still lingers. Did Harvey play it too safe compared to his peers? Some fans argue that while Bernie Mac was fearless, Harvey was too careful, too focused on being palatable for mainstream success. Others fire back, saying that's exactly what made him smart. Comedy isn't just about pushing boundaries, it's about longevity. And while some comics burned out or fell off, Harvey kept building. He wasn't just a funny man anymore. He was building an empire. And empires, my friends, require strategy. Remember, we're not just telling stories here, we're dissecting legends. So if you're loving this, do the smart thing. Follow this channel. The motivational side, what separates Steve Harvey from many comedians is this. He didn't stop at making people laugh. He started to inspire them, drawing from his own hardships, sleeping in his car, hustling through odd jobs, chasing a dream against impossible odds. Harvey began to pivot into motivational speaking. His message was simple but powerful. Don't give up. Your breakthrough is coming. Clips of his speeches went viral before viral was even a thing. He talked about faith, resilience, and the grind. People who didn't even care about comedy started tuning into Harvey because his story wasn't just funny, it was hopeful. And in a world drowning in negativity, that hope became a brand. Family Feud, reinventing himself By the time Steve Harvey stepped in as the host of Family Feud in 2010, most comedians would have been winding down their careers. But Harvey? He was just getting started. Again. At first, people laughed at the idea. Steve Harvey, the stand-up comic hosting a family game show, but within months, ratings soared. Harvey's facial expressions, his timing, his ability to turn awkward answers into viral gold, he transformed Family Feud into must-watch TV, and once again, controversy followed. Some critics said he was clowning too much. Others said he was making the show about him instead of the families. But the truth? The numbers don't lie. Harvey made Family Feud more popular than it had been in years. And guess what? The empire kept growing. The Miss Universe fiasco. No story about Steve Harvey is complete without the infamous 2015 Miss Universe incident. You know the one. The night. He crowned the wrong winner, announcing Miss Colombia instead of Miss Philippines. In that moment, Harvey went from beloved host to global meme. The backlash was instant and brutal. Social media exploded with jokes, insults, and memes that still circulate today. But here's the twist. Instead of ending his career, the fiasco made him even more famous. Why? Because Harvey owned it. He apologized. He laughed at himself. He turned one of the biggest mistakes in live TV history into proof that he was human, and that resilience can turn disaster into opportunity. And here's a lesson worth remembering. Sometimes controversy fuels a career more than perfection ever could. So let me remind you again, don't just watch these breakdowns, follow this channel. Because we don't just give you the highlights, we give you the real, messy, complicated truth behind the fame. The Empire. Today, Steve Harvey is more than a comedian. He's a brand. Talk shows, game shows, books, radio, motivational tours, Harvey has his hand in everything. And behind the suits and the smile is a man who remembers every cold night in his car, every rejection, every doubt. That Apollo set didn't just launch his career. It defined his philosophy, that one chance, one moment can change everything. And maybe that's why he's so determined to tell others to keep going. Because he knows firsthand, the breakthrough might be one night away. The man behind the laughter. By the time Steve Harvey became a household name, people thought they knew him. They saw the sharp suits, the quick wit, the easy laugh, the confident presence on television. But behind all of that, there's a man who still wrestles with fear, faith, and the ghosts of his past. You see, the Apollo didn't erase Harvey's scars, it magnified them. Because once you're on top, once you've tasted that applause, the pressure only grows heavier. Every set, every appearance, every joke has to hit. The world isn't forgiving to stars who fall, and that's why Harvey never stopped grinding. Even when the cameras were off, even when the lights went down, he was still working, still writing, still building, because deep down he never wanted to go back to that car where he once lived. And that hunger, that fear, is part of what makes Steve Harvey so fascinating. Faith as a driving force, one of the most polarizing parts of Steve Harvey's story, is his unapologetic faith. He doesn't just mention God in passing, he puts his belief at the center of his career. To some, this is inspiring. They see Harvey as a man who credits his success to something bigger than himself, a man unafraid to say, "I wouldn't be here without God." But to others, it's off-putting. Critics argue that Harvey leans too heavily into faith when explaining his success, ignoring the privilege, connections, and opportunities that also played a role. This tension is part of what keeps Harvey controversial. He isn't shy about his beliefs, and he doesn't care if it makes people uncomfortable. For Harvey, his faith isn't just personal, it's part of his brand, and it's a risky brand. Because the more you speak about faith, the more you open yourself up to attack. But Harvey, he thrives in that space. The money factor. Let's get real. Steve Harvey isn't just a funny man anymore. He's a businessman. And with that shift came another layer of debate. How much money does Harvey really make? Depending on who you ask, his net worth ranges from tens of millions to over 100 million. Between his books, his shows, his tours, and his business ventures, the man is sitting on an empire. But here's the kicker. Money brings envy, and envy brings critics. Some argue that Harvey sold out, chasing television gigs and brand deals instead of staying true to the raw edge that made him a star. Others say he earned every dime fair and square through decades of grinding. What do you think? Did Steve Harvey sell out, or did he level up? Drop your thoughts in the comments, but before you do, don't forget to follow this channel, because we're just scratching the surface of the debate. Critics and cancel culture. No star this big escapes the jaws of controversy, and Steve Harvey, he's had more than his fair share. He's been accused of making sexist comments, of being too harsh on his staff, of letting fame get to his head. In the age of cancel culture, some thought his career would crumble under the weight of those accusations. But here's the twist. Harvey always finds a way to bounce back. He apologizes when he needs to. He stands firm when he feels attacked, unfairly. And most importantly, he never stops working. Cancel culture thrives on silence, on stars disappearing when the backlash gets loud, but Harvey never disappears. He doubles down. He keeps showing up. And eventually, the storm passes. It's almost as if controversy is part of his fuel. Like every criticism, every headline, every angry tweet is just another reminder of the Apollo stage. Another hostile crowd he has to win over. And time again, he does. The family man. Persona beyond the fame, Harvey has built another layer of his brand. The family man. He talks about love, about marriage, about the struggles of relationships. His books and advice columns turned him into something more than a comedian. They turned him into a voice of authority. But here's the controversy again. Harvey has been married 3 times. He speaks about relationships with confidence, yet his personal life has been full of ups and downs. Critics argue, how can a man with multiple divorces give relationship advice? But fans see it differently. They argue that his experience, the mistakes, the failures, makes his advice real. He isn't speaking from theory, he's speaking from scars. This split between the critics who doubt him and the fans who adore him is exactly what keeps people talking. And in the entertainment industry, the worst thing you can be is irrelevant. The luck versus skill. Debate. We touched on this earlier, but it deserves more attention. Was Steve Harvey's Apollo set the result of skill or luck? Here's the argument for luck. The Apollo is unpredictable. One crowd could boo a comic off stage, while another might cheer the same jokes the next night. Maybe Harvey just caught the right audience at the right time. Maybe the stars aligned, but here's the argument for skill. Harvey had been grinding for years before that night. Every failed set, every rejection, every car he slept in was sharpening his craft. By the time he hit the Apollo stage, he wasn't lucky. He was ready. The truth? It's probably both. Because let's be honest, success in entertainment always involves a mix of preparation and timing. But that's the beauty of the debate. It keeps fans, critics, and historians talking decades later. And you know what else keeps the conversation alive? Following this channel. So go ahead, hit that follow button right now. His style, the power of storytelling. One reason Harvey stood out from other comedians is his storytelling. He doesn't just throw out punchlines, he builds narratives. He takes you on a journey, weaving humor into stories about everyday life. Whether it's about his childhood, his relationships, or just an awkward encounter at the grocery store, Harvey has a way of turning the ordinary into the extraordinary. He uses pauses, facial expressions, and timing like weapons. And here's the secret. Audiences don't just laugh at his jokes, they connect to them. They see themselves in his stories. And that's why when Harvey performs, it feels less like a comedy set and more like a conversation with an old friend. The suit as armor. Let's talk about the suits. Steve Harvey's suits are almost as famous as his comedy. Loud colors, bold patterns, sharp tailoring. He turned clothing into a statement. But the suit is more than fashion. It's armor. For Harvey, the suit symbolizes success. It's proof that he's no longer that homeless man sleeping in his car. Every time he steps on stage in a suit, he's reminding the world and himself that he made it. Some critics laugh at his style, calling it outdated or over the top. But fans see it as iconic. The suits are part of the brand. Without them, Harvey wouldn't be Harvey. The empire of media by now, Harvey isn't just a comedian or a host, he's a mogul. Radio shows, television, books, films. His brand stretches across every corner of entertainment. And this is where some people draw the line. They say Harvey became too commercial, too polished, too much of a businessman. That he left behind the raw, hungry comic that lit up the Apollo stage. But here's the counterpoint. Isn't that the goal? To evolve? To grow? To turn one breakthrough moment into a lifetime of relevance? Harvey proves that success in entertainment isn't about staying the same. It's about constantly reinventing yourself. The controversial side of motivation. Harvey's motivational speeches aren't without controversy. Some critics argue that his message oversimplifies success, that telling people to just jump or have faith ignores the systemic barriers that many face. Others, however, see his words as exactly what people need: encouragement. A reminder that even if the world is against you, you can still rise. And here's the thing, controversial or not, people keep listening. Because whether you agree or disagree, Harvey makes you feel something. And that's the mark of a true star. Rivalries and respect in comedy. No comedian rises without rivals. And Steve Harvey, despite his charm and laugh, has had his fair share of tension in the comedy world. Among the kings of comedy, for example, there were whispers of friction. Bernie Mac fans often argued Bernie should have been the true centerpiece, the one getting the most shine. Some claimed Harvey's role as host of the King's Tour was less about brilliance and more about business positioning. Was Harvey the funniest of the four? Most would say no, but was he the most strategic? Absolutely. And then there's the constant comparison to other greats: Richard Pryor, Eddie Murphy, Chris Rock, Dave Chappelle. Comedy fans love rankings, and Steve Harvey usually gets placed below those icons. Critics say his humor is too safe, too mainstream, lacking the razor-sharp edge of Chappelle or the raw genius of Pryor. But here's the counter-argument. Harvey never tried to be them. He didn't need to be the edgiest or the most profound. His gift was connection, relatability, charisma. He wasn't the philosopher-comedian dissecting politics or society. He was the everyday man making everyday struggles hilarious. And in that lane, he reigned supreme. The staff controversies behind the scenes, Harvey's empire hasn't been without cracks. Multiple reports surfaced over the years of Harvey being a tough or even harsh boss. There was the infamous leaked memo from his talk show staff where Harvey demanded, "Do not approach me unless I ask first. Do not ambush me. Do not open my dressing room door. If you see me in the hallway, don't speak." Critics pounced on that memo. They painted Harvey as arrogant, ungrateful, even cruel. For a man who built his brand on connection and laughter, the idea that he didn't want his own staff speaking to him was a bad look. But Harvey defended himself. He said the memo was about boundaries, about protecting his time and mental space, so he could perform at his best. And here's the thing. Many celebrities quietly enforce the same rules. Harvey just got caught saying it out loud. Was it a scandal? Absolutely. Did it destroy his career? Not even close. In fact, once again, Harvey weathered the storm, took the criticism, and moved on. The radio empire. Let's not forget one of Harvey's biggest wins, the Steve Harvey Morning Show. Long before he was a game show host or a talk show mogul, Harvey built a massive following on the radio. Millions tuned in daily to hear him joke, rant, motivate, and share stories. Radio gave Harvey something rare in entertainment: intimacy. On stage, he was larger than life. On TV, he was polished. But on the radio, he was raw. People driving to work in the morning felt like they were talking to a friend. That connection built loyalty, and loyalty is the key to longevity. The scandals of advice. Steve Harvey's books and advice columns have stirred more debates than almost any other part of his career. Act Like a Lady, Think Like a Man was a bestseller, and the movie adaptation was a smash hit. But the backlash? Huge. Critics said the book promoted outdated gender roles, that Harvey reduced relationships to manipulation games, that he oversimplified love into a set of rules. Feminists slammed him, calling the book regressive. Others accused him of hypocrisy. After all, how could a man with multiple failed marriages preach about relationships? And yet, fans bought millions of copies. Women filled stadiums to hear him speak. The controversy didn't kill the brand, it fueled it. Because when people argue, they pay attention. And Harvey knows better than anyone. Attention is currency. Global recognition and the Miss Universe redemption after the Miss Universe fiasco in 2015, you'd think Harvey would shy away from that stage forever. But not Steve Harvey. He came back, year after year, he kept hosting. The very mistake that could have ended his career became a running joke. One he leaned into, one that made the show even more talked about. Think about it. People who never cared about beauty pageants suddenly tuned in just to see if Harvey would mess up again. What was once a humiliation became a hook. That's the genius of Harvey, not perfection, but resilience. The philanthropy. Side beyond the spotlight, Harvey has poured money and time into giving back. His Steve and Marjorie Harvey Foundation has created mentorship programs for young men, camps, and scholarships. He's especially focused on helping fatherless boys because he knows what it's like to grow up with limited guidance. But even here, controversy follows. Some critics argue his foundation is more about image than impact. Others say he uses philanthropy as a shield from criticism. But for the kids whose lives were changed by those programs, the debate doesn't matter. The legacy question. And now, we arrive at the big question. What will Steve Harvey's legacy be? Will he be remembered as one of the greatest comedians of all time? Maybe not. Pryor, Murphy, Chappelle, those names might always sit higher in the Comedy Hall of Fame. But maybe that was never the point. Maybe Harvey's legacy isn't just about jokes. It's about transformation. About a man who came from nothing, who slept in his car, who bombed on stages, and still turned himself into a global icon. Maybe his legacy is resilience, reinvention. The idea that you don't need to be the sharpest or edgiest. Sometimes you just need to be the one who never stops showing up. And that Apollo set? That was the spark. The proof that one night, one stage, can change everything. The polarizing figure. Here's what makes Harvey so fascinating. He is both loved and hated. He inspires millions and irritates just as many. He's praised as authentic and slammed as fake. He's called a genius businessman and a sellout. And that, ironically, is what keeps him relevant. In entertainment, irrelevance is death. Controversy is fuel. And Steve Harvey has mastered the art of staying in the conversation. Whether you cheer for him or roll your eyes, you know his name, closing the story, so let's bring it full circle. A young man, broke, homeless, scraping by, steps onto the Apollo stage one night. The crowd is ready to eat him alive, but instead, he slays. He doesn't just tell jokes, he tells the truth. And in that moment, the world shifts. A star is born. Decades later, that star is still burning, maybe brighter than ever. Not because he's perfect, not because he's the funniest of all time, but because he refuses to quit. Steve Harvey is proof that resilience beats perfection. That one moment can change everything. That laughter, when wielded with truth, can move mountains. And that, my friends, is the comedy set that made Steve Harvey a star overnight, and the empire that followed. Final call, if you've stayed with me through this entire journey, through the Apollo set, the rise, the controversies, the legacy, then you know this story isn't just about comedy. It's about life, about persistence, about turning pain into power. And if you loved this deep dive, if you want more stories that dig beneath the headlines and show you the raw truth of entertainment icons, then don't wait another second. Follow this channel right now.